Right, Infernal Blessings. We are back with another video. Before we begin, some important announcements. First and foremost, if you are interested in a spiritual reading or a spiritual consultation, I offer various different readings. I offer telepathic demonic readings, Santa Muerte readings, Egyptian oracle readings, deity readings to see what spirits, gods, goddesses, demons walk with you. Again, not for the purpose of worshiping them, but for the purpose of learning more about yourself, strengthening your connection with those spirits so you can master yourself on your path of self-mastery. Or maybe interested in a shadow work reading, which I'm big on promoting that, because shadow work is just continual life work that just varies in degrees depending on what you got going on in your life. Because people always ask the question, does shadow work ever end? How long? It's dictated by what's going on in your life. It's never really officially over, but there should be periods where you're not dealing with a lot of nonsense because you're doing your shadow work, right? So shadow work readings point you in the right direction to see what you got going on subconsciously, things maybe you need to address. And the most important thing, it brings to the forefront the needs on your spiritual path that have to be addressed before your wants. Because as I've said a million times before, unfortunately, people focus on their wants first. Ritual work should be designed first and foremost with addressing your needs before your wants. Once you address the needs, the wants tend to fall into place, all right? Or maybe you're just interested in a spiritual consultation. Again, people use a consultation. Most people use it just for a free-for-all one-on-one to just ask me a bunch of questions. They come to the consultation with a bunch of questions written down, and they just will ask things one-on-one. Sometimes people will focus on a specific situation, or maybe there's something on the path they want to know specifically about. You can use it for whatever you want, but I just want to be clear. A spiritual consultation is not a reading. Unfortunately, as many times as I say that, people get that confused, all right? For any of the aforementioned, reach out to me. Shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com. That's khnum19@gmail.com. In that email, please include a full weekly availability that you're available. And then also please include the time zone that you are in. This way I can schedule and shoot you dates and times that work with your schedule and my schedule, all right? If you want to sign up for classes, which number one email I get constantly throughout the year, what kind of classes you do, what kind of classes you offer. Real simple, go to the Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, and join Tier 3. Tier 3 is going to give you access to the 3 private classes I do every month on Patreon, and it's also going to give you access to the group ritual we do together at the end of the month. All right? If you want to see what kind of classes I offer, and keep in mind when you do sign up, you don't just get access to the classes from the day you join moving forward. You get access to everything in the archives, which is going 4+ years back. You also get access to all the ritual work in the classes, the group work we're doing together as a class, how the classes work. You get a private Zoom link. You attend the classes live via Zoom if you're able to. You can interact with me, ask me questions. You can interact with others in the room. Don't worry if you can't get there live, because it's almost impossible to have a time that's conducive to everybody's work schedule or personal life. Everything is recorded and archived. You can take the classes on your own time. If you want to see the different classes I offer, go to the Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti, and then go to the collection section. That's going to show you every class, ongoing class right now. Just to name a few: Ancient Egyptian Vampiric class, Sith Dark Side Alchemy and Philosophy class, Telepathic Sorcery, Luciferian Magic and Self-Mastery class, Shadow Work class, Esoterical Occult Bible Study class, Kundalini Meditation and Awakening class, Eastern Left-Hand Path Occult class, Left-Hand Path Norse Mythology and Runes class, I'm probably missing a few. Just to give you an example, everything is archived in the collection section and in numerical order. So again, you can take the classes and do them on your own time if you can't get to them all the time live. Always encouraged to come live. It's always a great experience to interact and fellowship with other left-hand path occult practitioners. But anyway, check it out, patreon.com/Baniti, BANITI, tier 3. That's the tier you want to join. All right, also don't forget to check out social media pages out. Primordial Chaos 9, all one word, on Instagram. Primordial Chaos, 2 words, on Facebook. Also check us out on TikTok. PrimordialChaos3.com on TikTok. That's the handle, Primordial Chaos 3. All right, and that's the best place to stay abreast and up to date on the latest happenings here at Primordial Chaos, classes, events, etc. Also, we have established an official date now for the 7th annual Journey of the Black Adept Conference here in Hollywood, Florida. 4-day event that will begin with a meet and greet on Thursday, October 31st. So it begins on what they call Halloween. Couldn't have fell on a perfect time. We're thinking about maybe having a little costume party for this one. Meet and greet on Thursday night, Friday and Saturday. Workshops, classes, and presentations during the day. A group ritual on Friday and Saturday evening. And then the event caps off on November 3rd, Sunday, with a question and answer session from noon to 4 with yours truly. And it's just an open forum. You can ask whatever you want about what transpired through the conference or anything you might have questions about on the occult and the left-hand path. So that's October 31st to November 3rd in Hollywood, Florida. More information coming on that as we get closer to the day. If you need any further information, I will be assisting. I always point people in the right directions for hotels, Airbnbs, things of that nature. So looking to see some new folks out here this year, in addition to the regulars that come out every year. So that's October 31st to November 3rd, 7th Annual Journey of the Black Adept Conference. Don't forget to check out the Primordial Chaos podcast, available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. Okay. The direct link to the podcast, my contact email address, the direct link to the social media pages, and a direct link to the Primordial Chaos Patreon page. All of those links and information is in the description box of this video that you are watching right now. All right, you see the title. Well, somebody had emailed me about this, and, I was doing some research and said, can you maybe do a short tutorial or one of the 20-30 minute videos on this topic? I've talked about this in the past over the years, on and off. So again, I'll go through my understanding and my knowledge and wisdom on it. But again, it's always encouraged, do your own research. All right, come to your own conclusion. So I want to put that out there before I run through what I'm going to run through. All right, so the character we know is Akhenaten, right? Very famous pharaoh that we're very familiar with in Egypt. Let's talk about a few things that they attribute to him, but then I want to talk about some other things that is not talked about enough. It's debated in certain circles, and I believe it's not talked about for certain reasons, in my opinion, and I'll explain. Now, people attribute, as we know, Aten, right, which was a representation of the sun deity or the solar disk, right? And as I've said to you guys many times before, the sun in ancient Egypt was high in high regard, because it represented the source of all life and creation. So many say that Akhenaten unified or tried to attempt to unify this new spiritual system or this new cult, right, of unifying everything under the worship of one deity, which tied into the cult of Aten and the sun deity, right? Some even go further to say that he is what we would call, in modern day times, the father of monotheism. And that's not really true when you really look at what he was trying to do, right? So there's a difference of opinion on this. He was coming up with a different approach to spirituality that was not the norm in ancient Egypt at the time. And I'm sure if many of you have done your research and read, there was a lot of opposition to what he was trying to do because the power and authority at that time felt it was going against what Egyptian spirituality and culture was at that time. But the question is just really what was Akhenaten trying to really do? Okay. Well, let's look at one about him and his family and some information that's out there that's circulating. And there's different theories on this. And this is where you're going to have to do your own research. Okay. There are some who say Akhenaten was an androgynous being, or he was almost hermaphrodite in origin. Why is that said? Let's run through it. Well, if you look at a lot of the drawings, if you look at a lot of the depictions, the carvings, and how he's depicted, they point this out for a couple of reasons. One, if you look at, he clearly has broad African features in the face, very strong facial features of a masculine African man when you look at the carvings. But some say when you look at the body, it's almost feminine-like because it's very curvaceous. So some scholars have come to the conclusion, it's going to get a little sticky here because this is information not really talked about a lot. Some scholars claim he was androgynous. Some say he was hermaphrodite in origin. Now again, is there 100% documented proof of that? No. When you do your research, they've drawn this conclusion from certain data that they've gathered. But this is where you're going to have to do your research. I'm not saying either or. I'm just telling you in my research over the years, information that I came across. You draw your own conclusions. Now, who were hermaphrodites? Now, when you go back in, as I've told you guys before, when you go back into what is real gender, because when you go back into, say, the ancient Dravidian, or what who are called Hindu, or texts today, when you look at a lot of the ancient Dravidian culture, right? And even when you look at some of the pre-dynastic Egyptian culture, but mainly the Dravidian culture, a lot of the gods, goddesses, and deities in those cultures looked very androgynous in nature. They kind of looked like, if you look at depictions of Krishna, though it's a man, but there's the feminine overtone energy in appearance and how they're depicted. So there's a very dual masculine, feminine energy as some of these gods and goddesses were depicted. Now, the question and the reality is this. Some things you have to reason out. It's going to sound a little bizarre and crazy. The question is, what is real gender? When you understand evolution and how things evolve, what we see as mainstream gender, male and female, and how we dictate that by sex organs is kind of the norm, or where it's at today. Were there beings, quote unquote, that came from outside of this realm that were classified hermaphrodites, that had dual sex organs? Everybody knows what a hermaphrodite is. You can find evidence and traces of this, yes. You can find evidence and traces, period, of hermaphrodites. So now the question is, what is true gender? Right? Now we know through evolution, we know through race mixing, gene mixing, which again, I'm going through this stuff quick because this is not really the forum to go layer for layer in it. And I do plan on doing a live on something like this. So when you go through that information, you'll see this is what altered certain genetics within certain individuals. So the questions that arise, well, if there were hermaphrodite beings that came down here, though there still are traces of hermaphrodites being born today, but not in large numbers, the question is what happened? What labels one a man or a woman when it comes to dual sex? Or obviously your organs. And I don't want to get this misconstrued, but that's when we're talking in reference to physical gender, right? And I've talked about this for many times here. When you're talking about some beings that existed outside of this realm, we're dealing with a whole nother stage of evolution and creation. So I'm going to just leave that point there just for you to marinate on and further research. So there's traces of this, whether you go into the Vedas, whether you go into any other ancient text, whether you look at artwork, how a lot of these cultures depicted these beings. There's that androgyny aspect, that dual masculine, feminine energy aspect to some of these gods and goddesses. Now, having said that, let me turn back 360 back to Akhenaten. Well, some say he fell under that category, that he was not just a normal pharaoh, a mortal or a human. Now, when all the pharaohs were raised, now remember, that's a Greek word that just means lighthouse, a house of light. And the title pharaoh was given to somebody when they were raised up to a certain level of knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. They were given the title pharaoh. There was also something that the pharaoh had to do every X amount of years to show that he was mentally and spiritually fit to rule, which was called the Zed Festival. And the pharaoh basically had to show spiritually, mentally, and physically that he was fit to rule and reign in that Zed Festival. So the pharaoh was a title obtained through going through sacred mysteries, initiations, and most pharaohs usually were loyal to a deity and formed a cult around that deity. And Akhenaten did the same thing with the sun god Atum. Okay? But he took it further than just Atum Re or the triad of Ra and Re. He kind of went and took it a notch further, because he was trying to actually go deeper into the mysteries of Atum, right? Which on the surface appeared, and this is why they referred to him as the father of monotheism, because he was trying to unite the mysteries of ancient Egypt under one deity. That's where the problem comes in when you do the research. But the individual himself and the family, I want to focus more so on that. Just who was he? Was he just a regular pharaoh? And this is where it shifts a bit. The answer is, a lot of scholars say no. Also, I would refer you to Dr. Delbert Blair. He has talked about this in the past over the years. Rest in power to Dr. Delbert Blair, who I consider, as I've said many times before, a strong influence over me, especially when I was going through a transition period of learning in schools of knowledge. I always have to attribute he was there at a critical time when I was going through transition. So always shout outs to Dr. Delbert Blair, rest in power. Still don't think people keep his name alive like they should, but that's a whole nother story. All right. Anyway, as I was saying, now there are some theories out there when you look at Akhenaten, also back to his features, and if you look at some of the pictures depicted, when you see him in one of the most famous depictions, acknowledging the sun disk, or the solar god Atum, and you see his children below him in that same position, raising their hands to the sun to acknowledge, the sun as the source of all creation and life. All right? So the thing you want to notice is, some have pointed out, Akhenaten and his family, they had very large heads. Even when you look at how it's wrapped and covered, they had elongated heads. Why? What was being pointed out? When we couple in the facts of, were they these ancient prehistoric beings that were labeled as hermaphrodites that came down to this planet? Why did he have this elongated head along with the rest of his family? Why did he have certain features? Well, some scholars have gone as far to say that Akhenaten was an extraterrestrial, what we would call an extraterrestrial, that he wasn't from this planet. Now, there's a lot of theories and information, and again, do your own research. There's a lot of information out there in relation to the Orion constellation, to how the pyramids were built. A lot of people do believe that the ancient Egyptians were in contact with beings in these constellations, whether it was Aldebaran, Sirius B, Orion, that there's strong information to suggest that there was a connection there. When you look at also, again, as how the pyramids were constructed in alignment with those particular constellations, right? Were the pyramids specifically built? Some believed it was a gateway, right? They were landmarkers for a lot of these beings to come in, and they were mystery schools of learning. They weren't just burial sites, right? And many people have pretty much debunked that theory. They weren't just, as some people like to claim, burial grounds or sites where people buried the dead. They were used as ritual chambers, learning centers, and a lot of aspects for the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. So the extraterrestrial connection or origin, okay, has always been connected to Egypt, Samaria, but that's another story. But it's always been there, right? And there's a lot of theories based on certain data that's been gathered and collected over the years to suggest this in reference to Akhenaten. And you're going to have to do your research on that and come to that conclusion. I'm not saying neither here or there. If you're asking me my own opinion, from what I've researched, there is strong possibilities of this. Can it be 100% proven beyond a shadow or a doubt? That's something you're going to have to come to your own conclusion. Nothing really, in essence, can be proven 100% beyond a shadow of a doubt. I believe certain people raised themselves up to the realization of certain truths, especially in their ritual work, in their understanding and their communication with the gods and the goddesses. So I have to put it into that context. Putting this out because we had a viewer or a listener that reached out to me and was interested in this, so this is why I'm putting this out, to just put that understanding out there so you guys can do your further research. Another thing that has also been pointed out about ancient Egypt, the step pyramids or the ziggurat pyramids, is there also a reptilian connection with ancient Egypt? And yes, there's information to state there is, right? We're all familiar with the Ogdoads, the water beings, the 8 Ogdoads, which are responsible, an important part of understanding the creation concept of Egypt. Obviously, two that I talk about a lot, Nun and Nunet, which are, key pivotal deities that represent, Nun and Nunet represent. Nun represents the chaotic waters of the dark, watery abyss. We're talking about that state of the void and darkness that we correlate in the occult, that state of nothingness before what we know as territory or earthly creation, right? So there are water beings also connected to ancient Egypt that go back to the Reptilians, and that connects to the Ogdoads. And some say the step pyramids or the ziggurats in ancient Egypt were sites that were built to connect with them, right? And that's one other thing you probably have heard Dr. Delbert Blair talk about in the past. I would make reference to him. Credo Mutwa, he gets into it. There's a lot of information out there that you can research on that if you so choose. Okay. So all of this stuff, and again, it's theories you're going to have to research, but there is data to support the possibility of a lot of this being real. Okay, so I'm just going to put it out there. There is the reality to support a lot of this being real. Okay, so whether you're talking about the reptilian connection, the connection with the constellations and Aldebaran and Orion and Sirius B, the ziggurat step pyramids, the Ogdoads, and you look at some of these characteristics of Akhenaten and his family, I'm going to say there's a lot of evidence to suggest there is some extraterrestrial connection or origin. Now, everybody has their own different perspective on it. I'm very selective on how I talk about it because, yes, it can get misconstrued because sometimes people can go completely spooky with it, and I try to avoid that. I try to stay grounded in it. But I try to present the information to you so you can do more thorough and intense research on the subject. Okay. fact of the matter is, too, even when you look at the construction of the pyramids, right, there's always been this on and off debate for years. How were they built? Some of the theories to me are comical, how they claim these stones and capstones were moved, which is literally impossible. Just that mystery alone, there's theories out there to state that the ancient Egyptians knew exactly where all, as you know, our planet has 163 magnetic grids on it. And some say they were able to use the energy from those magnetic grids to move a lot of these objects. I mean, when you get into even Coral Castle, Edward Leeds Scanlon, Nikola Tesla, right? A lot of them had the technology. Now, Edward Leeds Scanlon's in Coral Castle is a very interesting thing. Here's a man who barely weighed 100 pounds, and nobody ever spotted this man moving any of those objects. Sounds very similar to what took place in ancient Egypt, okay? Sounds very similar. So did they have the technology and the knowledge? I don't believe. I've seen a lot of theories how they claim they tied these ropes and they had labor workers moved. I don't believe it. I just think when you do the research that there definitely was something more of a greater magnitude took place in order to make that happen, well beyond this theory, how they claim, this basic simplistic theory of how they believe these pyramids were built, right? Now, having said all that, again, there's a lot more layers to this. Remember, these quick tutorials are just to put out some key points to spark your awareness and encourage and motivate you to do further research, right? So, having said that, the beauty of this is, on this path of the occult, in the left-hand path, and it's one of the systems I love to teach, we work with this. We work with the mysteries of ancient Egypt through Egyptian Heka, right? We have a whole system that I teach on the mysteries of the coming forth by day, because the coming forth by day, or what people call the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, is a magical text. It's a text of spells and magic. If you've read it thoroughly, that's why people always ask, why you see places where there's blanks and names to be inserted. These were all spells, rituals, and magic, okay? That text is a very highly spiritual text, and it can be used, or when used correctly in magical form, it's a powerful, powerful tool. So through Egyptian Heka is how I teach the mysteries of the left-hand path or occult aspect of the Egyptian mysteries. And the funny thing that always stands out to me of a lot of people who teach about ancient Egypt and these different systems of consciousness, a lot of it is the last 46 dynasties or the Hyksos dynasties. Nobody rarely ever teaches about the pre-dynastic Egyptians. Nobody ever teaches about the magical aspect of ancient Egypt when dealing with Heka and the power of Heka and what it is. A lot of people just get into all this philosophical stuff, and they want to correlate it to religion, and all right, that serves a purpose to a degree. But let's talk about some of the ancient information and knowledge that took place in ancient Egypt. Okay, why aren't we talking about those things? And this is the point, and this is why I touch on these videos. I want to make it clear what people fail to understand. The aspect of the occult and the left-hand path that I am teaching. I'm not just focusing on just a specific dynamic of the occult and the left-hand path, where some might just be focusing on Satanism or Luciferianism, right? These are all parts of the occult, right? I talk about all these things, but the level of information and knowledge that we deal with is vast and wide. I'm trying to show you a full spectrum of these things. So when it comes to this topic, extraterrestrial origin, this, that, and the other, as I've said before, we would have to be fools to think we are the only intelligent life form on this planet. It's comical. Okay? Regardless, you can have your own personal opinion and belief on that, right? We would have to be foolish to think there are no intelligent beings that live outside of our planet or our galaxy or our solar system. Ancient texts have alluded to it for years. There's information in different levels of data and knowledge that can be gathered and collected to support this. But I always like to, again, leave it up to the practitioner. Okay? And one thing I also learned from Dr. Delbert Blair is the definition of real truth. Right? That's why I did a video a few years back. I always bring it up once in a while because it went over people's heads. Is there such a thing as pure, undiluted truth? And nobody ever really addressed that. Some will say yes. There's not. There's no such thing. Truth is based on perception and the reality of that perception. And then truth becomes a reality when the individual raises themselves up to the realization of that truth. That's when truth becomes real to each individual. Not because somebody made a statement in a book or in a lecture and made a claim that this is the infallible truth. That doesn't make something truth. Just think about everything you've experienced in life. When you came to the realization of a thing, a concept, a level of information, and you confirm that within, that's when it manifested within you as truth. Okay? So that's why I always put that out there. And that's something years back that Dr. Delbert Blair used to teach about. Right? Because truth is based on perception. Truth is based on the experiences you've been through. And all of your experience, the level of knowledge and wisdom that you have obtained is going to determine how you perceive something. So all levels of truth for each individual on an individual basis is going to be based on how they perceive or their perception of that truth. Okay? And that's what makes the left-hand path, or the path of self-mastery, as I like to call it, unique from any other path. Because each individual has to go through that process before they can even obtain that certain level of knowledge or wisdom or the power of understanding what real truth is. Okay? And that's why I've always said, look, don't accept anything anybody tells you. Don't believe anything because, look, even because if there's millions of people accepting something as a truth, it may not be true. Look at Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. There's millions upon billions. So you can say on the flip side, well, if there's millions upon millions of people subscribing to them religions, doesn't that make it the truth? Not necessarily, no. It just means it was easy to dupe a lot of people with a concept that was easy to sell. That's all it means. Just do basic common sense and you'll come to the conclusions and get a lot of answers to this. So, having said that, my personal perspective in a nutshell is I do think there is some extraterrestrial origin to Egypt, all the aforementioned things I've said. I do think Pharaoh Akhenaten wasn't just a regular pharaoh. This is why he stood out. Yes, I understand all the other concept. Was he the true face of the Messiah? Where was he particular? Yes, you can connect biblical scripture to a lot of this, and I do that in the Esoterical Occult Bible Study class. I show you where they've gotten a lot of these stories from and how they just twisted the names, dates, and places of these individuals to validate the authenticity of their Bible and their books. It's what we focus on. And as I said before, I keep trying to tell people this. The Bible is not a bad book when you understand the esoterical and the occult aspect of the book. Because when you understand it was grafted from text and scriptures that came long before it, you have a better understanding of it. The Bible is a destructive tool. It's a force of death mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically. When it's used in the form of religion, when men have taken it, twisted the words, their interpretation of it, now it becomes a weapon that can be used against people. How? To keep them mentally indoctrinated and mentally enslaved. That's how. To constantly force feed their minds lie upon lie. And then it becomes a deadly tool because it casts people into a state of mental slumber and sleep. Okay? But when we use it as another occult tool in our arsenal, there's a lot of gems in there if you just really understand the occult breakdown of it. Okay? That's why when you look at it from a religious perspective, through religious eyes, it doesn't make sense. Because they don't understand the allegorical and literal part of the scriptures. Okay, that's where Goddess, you, comes in and has to decipher that understanding. Okay, that's what we do, people. All right, so anyway, without getting too long-winded, I hope this tutorial helped. Appreciate the email from the person that suggested. Good topic. I know some of you have reached out. If I've missed it, maybe you've reached out to me in the past because of the influx of emails I get. Maybe I missed it. If there's something you want to see a short 20-30 minute tutorial on, a subject, if I have the ability to get to it, and if it's something I feel is worthwhile to discuss, shoot me an email. I'm always open to listening to suggestions for these short 20-30 minute videos. And that's what they're for, just to spark that knowledge, spark that intellect, right? That's what the purpose is, all right? So hopefully this video helped. I appreciate you guys. We will talk soon. Infernal blessings.